Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of Breadcrumbs, a podcast for people who know it's not working. So, I am your host, Kevin Howard, and in this podcast, what we're going to talk about is who am I? Who are you? Right? Okay. In episode 1, and I do hope you check it out, I laid out a distillation of where we are in America. And I reduced it down to five major things. We reelected Donald J. Trump as president of the United States. And I focused on who actually elected him, that we are going through the second anniversary of Hamas's terrorist attack that killed over 1,100 Israelis and took 250 hostages, and how Israel has responded to that and the implications of that. That's number two. Number three, I talked about, and actually it was number two, and Hamas was number three. But number three, I talked about the housing affordability crisis in America. And I demonstrated how it's the worst in US history, notwithstanding, even including the Great Depression. Okay. Number four, I talked about how we've entered the fourth year of the war in Ukraine. And I talked about the comparison between what actually led to the war in Ukraine and what we were told, okay, about it. And then finally, I ended with just a brief acknowledgement to the climate crisis that we no longer consider real, or at least our president no longer considers real. So that was an attempt to mark where we are in America today, because it feels kind of crazy, kind of askew from what any of us had thought where we would be as a country, as a society, and as individuals. So amongst all that whirlwind, things so big and beyond us in our lives, where do we find ourselves? And so in this episode 2, we're going to look at who we are amidst all of that. And once we look at who we are and get a sober look of who we actually are, we're going to address how can we make a difference when all the problems seem too big to fix. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But before I get there, I just want to put a few administrative things out. I have, wherever you're seeing this podcast, I have posted episode 0, which gives a broader overview of what this podcast and the goals of this podcast are, and also gives you an opportunity, or gives you the details on how you can join the Breadcrumbs community on Patreon. And then I give you a detailed background on myself, your host, Kevin Howard, in order for you to get some perspective on who I am. Because when we do these episodes, this is not about what makes Kevin Howard special. The basis by which we're going to have these conversations is all about our shared experiences and our shared humanity. Because we live in a culture that has literally weaponized everything that makes us unique. Everything that makes us special has been weaponized to offend someone and to pit some people against other people. That's not what we're doing here. So everything that I'm going to speak to are things that we've gone through together and things that we experience in our lives, in our everyday lives, that make us human. So our shared experiences and our shared humanity are going to be the wellspring that we relate to each other as we try to figure out questions like, who am I? Or what the hell is going on in the world? Okay, so let us begin. Oh, as I said, so make sure you go to see episode 0 after you've watched this episode. And by all means, check out episode 1, both of which are right here available wherever you're getting this podcast. So on to episode 2. Who am I? You know, the thing about the question of who am I and whether or not in our shared experiences we get much opportunity to answer that question. Um, well, it occurred to me that it was important that I look at that question. It's because I grew up in America. I grew up loving this country. I grew up raised by an immigrant who became a naturalized American citizen and raised me to love this country passionately because she understood what it was to live somewhere else. And she understood what a privilege it was to live in America. So after being raised by a woman like that, he loved America. And the first thing I did after graduating high school, marrying my high school sweetheart, was I volunteered for the military and served 4 years active duty, right? To serve my country, to serve the country that gave me everything. So let me be very clear. I was a patriotic, diehard, dyed in the wool, nose wide open American. So I built my whole life based on the cultural virtues that it is to be an American: freedom, independence, self interest, and competition. And I sought to build my American dream. And let's remind ourselves what our American dream is, because it's so far afield from what's possible today that some people start to forget. But this is how I was raised. And maybe this is how you were raised too. The American dream is that we would use our ingenuity and our willingness to work hard and play by the rules and pay our taxes, do all the things that our society encourages us to do, to build a life that allows us to earn sufficient money that we can actually reclaim our time and do with it what we would choose to do because we have enough resource to support ourselves without having to punch a clock somewhere. So we go about setting our lives as young adults, getting the skills we need, cultivating the value add, our value proposition, so that we can generate these earnings, so that ultimately we can reclaim our time. That it manifests itself in the capacity to buy your own home, that manifests itself in your capacity to take care of your family, that manifests itself in the capacity to save for your retirement, to take vacations, to save for your colleges, your children's college education, and so on and so forth. And ultimately, at the earliest possible age, to get off the grind and live the life where you could spend the time with your family and friends in the way that you want. The American dream. So I set about, like a laser beam, focused in on that. After my 4 years in the military, served first, then I can build my life for my benefit. Okay, that's what I did. And I became a commercial banker. I help entrepreneurs build their own businesses. And I was successful. And by the time I hit my early 40s, I had achieved an idyllic middle class American dream, right? I mean, but here's the problem. So I did all that work and spent at least half of my life. I mean, how long do we live? Life expectancy is in the high 70s, right? So I spent half my life focusing on chasing this American dream that I believed deeply in. And when I got there, what I realized was, is this all life has to offer? Is this all it is? If the only thing I have to look ahead is to do the next deal? Yes, it's helping people and I'm making money and I got a nice house and all those wonderful things. But I found no meaning, no sense of purpose in what I had achieved. And so what I discovered is I'd set up my entire life on the basis of chasing this American dream. And I found it to be the road to nowhere, the road to emptiness, the road to stuff, the road to comfort. But life is not just about comfort. There's a reason why here in America, the wealthiest country on the planet, you have people, no matter their wealth or privilege, feeling deeply lost, committing suicide at all levels of socioeconomic class, because purpose in life is not simply the accumulation of stuff. And I discovered that by living it. Okay, maybe this relates to you, right? Okay. So if I had spent half my life building my life to produce a condition that led me to something that I didn't find meaningful, it didn't fulfill me, it didn't give me a sense of purpose. Clearly, I didn't know who I am. So I set about to say, okay, well, I got to figure this out. I got to figure this out. I don't know who Kevin Howard is, right? And so I will say, fast forward, because it took me like 10 years to dig into that. And it won't have to take you 10 years. That's why you're here on this podcast, is because we're going to go through this much quicker than that. Okay. But the idea is, one of the things I realized coming through that process is that who I am really is three basic components. And I think you will find this relates to you, right? Shared experience, shared humanity. I am my beliefs. I think, therefore I am. I am my feelings, my passion, my love for the country, my love for my family, my love for each other, my love of nature. I am my emotion, right? My feelings, what is important to me, right? But I'm also this body right here, the physical body. And so in examining who am I, well, I found that thinking about my beliefs, thinking about my feelings and what they mean and how they interact were esoteric, were intangible, something to be understood. But when you don't know who you are, you got to start where you can actually get some traction. So I said, you know what? Okay, I know I'm this body. I know I cannot function in this world without this body right here. So let me just look at this body. I'm looking at it in the mirror. I see who I am. This is Kevin Howard. Okay, good. So who is this? How does this body function? What can I learn by examining my body? Okay, now, before I get into that journey, let me introduce something. And it's what I call the cultural blind spot. It's the blind spot of modernity. Because another thing, shared experience, we are encouraged to multitask, to maximize the efficiency of our time by being able to do multiple things at the same time. Okay. And that's a virtue. That's multitasking is one of the virtues, particularly of being a competitive American, self-interested American, right? Free American. Okay. So, but here's the problem with multitasking. And I'll use an example. Most of us have a typical route we take when we drive home from work. For those of us who remember going to work in an office, I know that's for you youngins. We used to go to work in an office. Okay. But okay. So for most of us who used to go to an office to work and we drive home, right? We had a typical route. And oftentimes it involved traffic if we dealt with a downtown area going out to the suburbs or whatever. But we had a route, right? Whatever that route was. And it was consistent. We take the route every day. And so it's not abnormal before we get on the road to call home and say, hey, talk to your wife and say, hey, do you need me to pick up something on the way home? Because, I'm coming in. And so, yeah, there's going to be, pick up the milk, pick up this and that. And, little Johnny needs this and the dog needs more dog food. So stop and pick that up. Okay, great. Then you get in the car. You got 1,000 things on your head. You just had a day, And what happens is you drive and you've been thinking about all those things, multitasking. And what happens? You are in your driveway and you're thinking, oh, I forgot to stop to get Johnny's milk and the dog food. Damn. How did that happen? In fact, while you're sitting in the driveway, you don't remember anything you experienced on the road. Why? Because you were thinking about whatever happened in your day, what you're going to have to do tomorrow, a series of things. But at the same time, when you were thinking those things, your eyes were focused. You weren't running into cars. You turned when you needed to turn. You took the route that you have already taken. And your ability to do that is because you do this all the time, your body knows exactly what to do. And it simply does it while you are seeing to make sure you're not going to crash into someone, or if someone jumps in front of you, will notice that that's the stuff that brings you back into the present moment. But otherwise, it's on autopilot, happening essentially outside of the range of your focus. So even though you left work intending to stop and pick up the milk and pick up the dog food, because your focus was not on that, was on what you were thinking, wasn't even on your driving, right? You managed to get all the way home and did not pick up the dog food. This is what's called a blind spot. So this is the flip side of autopilot. This is the flip side of multitasking, is that many things that you do and that we are capable of doing, all those things that are on autopilot that are not the things that we're focusing on. So we're multitasking three things. And so task number 2 and task number 3, they're being done on autopilot. You can only focus your attention on one thing at a time. So they're being done on autopilot, and therefore they are beyond your discretionary authority, your conscious discretionary authority. They're being done as you've always done them. Okay. And so much about who I am, and you will find who you are, is in that blind spot. So believe me when I say nothing I'm about to say you've never heard before. It's just that you're going to find, like me, that you haven't thought about these things, maybe never. Maybe never. But it's time that we think about them, because this is actually who we are. So, okay, so now back to my story about my body. So I said, okay, clean slate. I'm 41, 42, whatever I was. And clearly I realized I didn't know who I was, because I had built a whole life that meant nothing to me other than, thank you, I'm comfortable. I like having nice things, but it gave me no sense of purpose. Maybe you feel familiar with that feeling. So since I don't know who I am, I started with the basics. Go back to the basics. This body, how do I survive every day? Because once again, that's the joy about our shared experiences. That's the joy about our shared humanity. Within this wellspring of experience, you don't need a doctorate degree to understand how you survive every day. But the problem is, as I said, with the multitasking, is that we don't think about how we survive every day. Just like right now, if you feel like getting up and walking across the room, you can do it. You don't need to think about how you're going to do it. But I can tell you this much: there are people with doctorates in robotics who design robots to do what we do without even thinking, because it's complex to get up and walk across the room, right? But we can do it in autopilot. Okay, well, back to the analogy, back to the focus on my body, back to a basic question: how I survive every day. You're like, come on, Kevin, I survive every day. Okay, well, let's look at that. Let's look at that. How do we survive every day? How do I survive every day? Well, first thing I notice, I don't produce the air I breathe. I can't survive without air. I don't produce the air I breathe. I don't produce the food I eat. I don't care if you are a farmer. The farmer does not produce the food he eats or she eats, right? Why? Because it takes millions of years and trillions of critters who've decomposed over time to produce fertile soil, to provide the nutrients that the farmer then puts seed in to grow, that produces the fruit. So it becomes a co-creation process. Even the farmer can't produce the food by themselves. It takes the earth, it takes weather, it takes rain, it takes nutrients, it takes trillions of critters decomposed over time. And all that together produces the food we eat. So therefore, I don't produce the food I eat. I don't produce the water I drink. I went down this whole list. And I noticed, oh my God, okay, implications of all the things that I need to survive that I don't produce. Not only don't I produce, I can't produce it, right? Okay. Well, that shocked me. Okay. Just let's leave that out there for a second because we're going to get back to it. But here's the thing. Okay. So that was the first thing. I recognized that this body is actually not designed to be self-sustaining. When I think about how I actually function, when I think about, well, what does a good day feel like? Right. Okay. So a good day is you wake up, you have some breakfast with your wife or your boyfriend or whomever, significant other, right? You get into your day, everything seems to go well. The food is good, body loves it. You get some exercise, you're feeling the sun, you're doing the things you choose to do. You get through the whole day, nothing bad happens. You get through the evening, you lay down in bed, and you think, wow, that was a good day. Well, in order for us to experience that day, is for me to experience that day, because I don't produce any of the stuff like we talked about, how do I survive? I started to realize that in order for us to enjoy a good day, in order for me to enjoy a good day, many, 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 many people that I have never met and will never meet, and many things that I absolutely do not control must do what they do and do it well in order for me to have a good day. Now, I participate in my good day. I make choices in the day. We can go left or we can go right, and different things are going to happen depending on what we choose. So I participate in that day. But how the actual day goes is a combination of what I choose to do and what all those people do. And when any one of them screw up, because maybe they're stressed out, maybe they don't have what they need, maybe they're distracted, right? That's when my day gets screwed up. Why? Because I get the food poisoning, because the brakes don't work on my car, maybe because the mechanic who put in the brake pads didn't do it right because they were distracted, right? All the bad things that we know all too well happen to us, right? When our days don't go the way we want them, happen because someone, and often not intentionally, not maliciously, but sometimes that too, didn't do what they do well. And that's how it impacts us. So once I sat down and realized that reality, that I can't get through the day, I can't get through the day without the contributions of many people I will never know. All of a sudden, I realized those people are really important. And it's not just those people, it is the natural environment that sustains me. Because none of us can do what we do if we exhale carbon dioxide and the trees don't inhale our carbon dioxide and then they exhale oxygen clean. We can't do anything. Okay. If the sunlight, if the sun goes out, game over. We can't do anything. If the atmospheric pressure of this planet approaches what it is in deep space, the skin on our bodies will not hold the internal pressure. And we will balloon to a point where it will kill us. So, in other words, we can't do anything without those things in the natural environment that sustain us, along with all the things that the rest of us do that we rely on every day. This is how we exist. This is how we function. Okay. So when I looked at the most basic and undeniable aspect of who I am, this body, I realized I am my existence. I exist as a part of a reality greater than myself, that I cannot exist by myself. Okay, now compare that to our cultural virtues. Compare that to the story we tell ourselves about who we actually are. The notion of being free, the notion of being independent, the notion that I can advance, I have a fundamental right to pursue my happiness, and that self interest is a mechanism to serve that. Thinking about me and how things are going to affect me can produce my happiness when I live in a context where I can't survive without all these other people doing what they do. Okay? Think about how we earn the resources, the money we need to buy all the things that we actually need to survive that we can't produce for ourselves. We compete. Ask yourself, is there a reason why none of us really compete with the people we care the most about? Like, just imagine sitting at the dinner table at night. You know, the two kids, your significant other, husband, wife, same gender, multi-gender, no gender, everyone's sitting around the table, right? Okay. And imagine we treat how everyone is going to eat around that table the way we treat each other when we step outside. Because I could tell you this much, in order for me to earn $1, I got to beat somebody. That's you too. In order for us to earn anything, we have to defeat somebody. We're competing. And it's win or lose. You want the job, right? You polish up your resume, build your skills so that you could be the best to get the job. And then they gave you the job. You had to earn the money, and everyone else who applied. And believe me, there's a lot more people who applied than just you, right? Didn't just me. Losses out there. And hopefully they find something else. And more than likely, it's not going to be as good as this job, because this is why we were all going for this job. So, right, that's how we treat each other out there, out in the broader economy. But around our dinner tables, we don't do that. Why? Because we care about those people, because we don't want them to lose. We want them to eat. We want them to be strong and healthy. And oh, by the way, we don't want the price of us eating to be that they can't eat. So no, we don't compete with people we care about. So let me ask you a question. If when I went through this process of figuring out this body to answer the question of who I am, and I came to the conclusion that I survive every day based on the contributions of many people I will never know. How exactly, how exactly did I get to a place that it means nothing to me, that in order to take care of myself, I have to hurt them? I have to compete against them. I have to make them losers. Because that's what's going on. Look around each of us. The only difference that stands in between those of us who have nice houses, who have heat, who have air conditioning, who have the things, and the person standing on the road with the sign is our wins and losses. Is our wins and losses. And no matter how privileged we think we are, the moment we go on a losing streak, lose the job, You don't get the deal, on and on and on, and that death spiral occurs, we move closer and closer to carrying the sign on the side of the road. Part of what I covered in terms of the big problems of where we are in America is too many people, the American middle class, let alone the American working class, let alone the American working poor, let alone indigenous people who still have housing. Too many of those people can see how they're going to be the person carrying the sign on the side of the road. And you know why? Because those people who are benefiting from the society as it is are putting them there by winning. And in the winning, we get the spoils and they get bupkis. Okay, so let's go back to Kevin Howard. Let's go back to me achieving the American dream. Let's go back to the idea that I won, that I had a beautiful house and a beautiful family and money in the bank and a way to earn more money. Why? How is it possible that that didn't mean more to me than the comfort of enjoying it? Was because I know in my blind spot that I no longer think about, because all I'm thinking about is freedom, independence, self-interest, competition. I competed fair and square, so I'm not thinking about the losers. But that don't mean that I don't realize that I didn't build the house that I'm in, or produce the food that I eat, or produce the air that I breathe. Of course I know it. It's on autopilot back there. And yet I am living on the backs, on the throats of the people who serve me every day. Don't think it's true. What did we learn? One important lesson we learned in COVID, when many of us got to shelter in place. What is the conditions of the essential workers that we learned? The one thing that brought them most together, they're some of the lowest earning people in the country. Not the lowest, but some of the lowest. Essential workers in the competition to take care of themselves and their families are losing to non-essential, jobs, people, professions that doesn't have to get out there in the middle of a pandemic and risk their lives because what they do is essential, right? Those people are living better. Those people are living better at the expense of the people we must have. Law enforcement, security, medical. I mean, in terms of the nurses, aides, all the assistants, right? All those, yeah, all those essential things. The person who goes up in the tree to make sure you got electricity in your house. On and on and on. Okay, so come back full circle. One of the things I learned once I looked at just the undeniable aspect of who I am, my physical experience, my physical body, is that I don't live independently. To be independent means to be self-sufficient, to not need anybody else, anybody or anything. And when you aspire in a very rationalizing way for independence, as we do in America, as is our core virtue, and yet you live in an interdependent way, it's mutually fulfilling, mutually serving, but it's not codependency. But if you live interdependently, you have to have the support of many other people and many other things in order for us to survive. But your belief system suggests that you are independent, or that independence is an aspirational condition. You're trying to be independent. That condition is called cognitive dissonance, where your actual experience is different. Your lived experience is different from your belief system, from what you think is the reality, what you believe is the reality. So it's interesting. Examining my body helped me to understand my beliefs were out of line. And so if you look up cognitive dissonance and you look up how it makes you feel and what it does to you, right, you start to see why people who experience cognitive dissonance, as I did, don't have a sense of meaning. It's disorientating. Why? Because your lived experience is different from your belief system. So therefore, what it leaves you without meaning. Okay. So then by recognizing that who is Kevin Howard, just looking at the physical, undeniable aspects of how I exist demonstrates that I am an individual because I exercise choices. I don't need everybody to make my choices. I exercise choices, but I do so in relationship, in symbiotic, in interdependent relationship with all of you and the rest of humanity and the history of humanity. Because, oh, by the way, I didn't make the language that I speak. I doubt you did either. So I live in symbiotic relationship with all of humanity, with all of life. Did you know we have critters that are not a part of our bodies in our gut that help us digest, that help our bodies regulate the capacity to digest our food? Yeah, we live in symbiotic, interdependent relationship with all life on earth and the natural environment that sustains us. That's how we exist. And if you're like me, I'm grateful to be alive. Right? So anyone who supports my life is family to me. How about you? Right? I mean, there's a reason why when we look at our beautiful animals, our pets, when they look at us, we get unconditional love. Because you know why? They're not confused about who takes care of them every day. I lived more than half my life competing against the hands that serve me, being indifferent to the fact that I'm benefiting at their expense, not realizing that because I understand that that's true based on my lived experiences, that no matter how much I earn, I can never feel fulfilled because I was suffering from cognitive dissonance. The misalignment between my beliefs and how I actually live. Well, the good news is we can adjust. The good news is that by realizing that, it helped me to penetrate behind the cultural belief system and find the person I actually am. And what this podcast is all about is encouraging you to do the same thing. To look to your lived experience, to look to how you survive every day. Because I assure you, it's very much how I survive every day. We have different jobs, there are different things that make it unique, but most of it is shared. We need nutrient food. We need air. We need water. We need shelter. And we don't produce any of that. Okay. So, right, look at those things and then let it seep in what the implications are based on how you make your choices. Because I could tell you this much, the reason why I never thought of these things is because I made my choices based on my cultural belief system. I made my choices because I was taught that I'm independent, that I'm free. Okay. And let's speak a moment about freedom, because these things are not bad. It's just the application is beyond the reasonable range. So, what am I talking about? Let's use the RPMs on your car as an example. Okay? The car is engineered and designed to function as long as the RPMs on your car stay within a certain range, 3,000, 4,000, RPMs. Okay. But you'll look, once it gets past 8,000 or in that range, it turns red, right? That's an indicator that beyond this, entering this range, the car is not going to function the way it's designed. You will find, I know I found in life, most things are like that. I mean, take the oxygen we require. If you don't have enough oxygen, you will die. If you get too much oxygen in the wrong ways, like the bends, you could die. But within the normal, reasonable range, it's what you need to survive. Okay, most things in life are like that. Well, so is freedom. To define freedom in a way that can't exist is self-defeating. So, idea that I can exercise my choices without consideration of the people who allow me to live, of the ecology that allows me to live, is not freedom. That's suicide. Okay, this is what I mean. So it's not my critique of these virtues is not that they're absolutely wrong, is that we have pushed them far out of the reasonable range where they no longer function the way they're intended. A virtue is supposed to be a measuring stick that we live up to. It's supposed to be a very good thing, right? Well, it's not a very good thing if it inspires us to hate, to hurt, to harm, to be indifferent to the hands that we rely on every day and the ecology that sustains all life on the planet. Because right now we are ignoring those things. Right now we're acting like those things are less important. So let's come back to this conversation about who we are. So, in examining my physical body and examining how I exist every day, I learned that I am an individual empowered to make individual choices, but all the choices I make are in relationship with you, the rest of humanity, all life on earth, and the natural environment that sustains us. That's just how I exist. And I think that if you look at your lived experience, you will find that you exist the same way too. Okay. So a distillation, and here's the breadcrumb for episode 2. Our cultural belief system as Americans encourage us to live like a circle, like a circle. Imagine a beautiful, perfect circle, okay? Free, independent, self-interested circle. But our lived experience tells us we are the infinity symbol, which is a sideways 8. Yeah, that. Sideways 8. Everything on the left side of that circle is everything we need before we're able to do anything. And everything on the right side of the circle is what we choose to do. Okay. In order for us to live according to our cultural belief systems, freedom, independence, self-interest, and competition, we have to forget about everything we receive that empowers us to do anything. And then direct what we choose to do for our benefit. See, because the only way you can be self-interested is to forget that you don't survive independently, that you survive based on the contributions of other people that you happen to be harming in the competition that you're benefiting from. So if you forget about the fact that all these people had to do what they do and do well in order for you to function, to then turn around and decide what you're going to do, right? You would do what comes natural. You would do what our pets do. You would look with favor, with gratefulness onto all that allows you to live, that empowers you to make choices. You would not be and could not be unless you were some sort of sociopath, which we're not. Could not be as indifferent. It's the reason why we don't compete with people we love. Okay. So the breadcrumb here is, and it goes to the question is, well, what can I do when all the problems seem too big to fix? The only thing we get to control in this life is you, is me. We control ourselves. Someone cuts you off in traffic. It's been a beautiful day. What you do next can make it the best day, could make it continue to be a great day, or you can make it the worst day of your life based on what you do next. Right? So we are empowered to make choices. And those choices we can control. So what you can do to address all the problems that you see in the world that are impacting our lives, because they are now making it very difficult for us to simply go about our lives and live the way we'd like to live, because the problems are pressing us now. Okay? Is make sure that you don't do anything, or you do as least as you can to contribute to the problems. Okay? We can do that. We can, now we have to live in this world. We have to compete to eat. We need to raise money. But we are empowered once we recognize that we don't survive by ourselves. We can approach how we do what we do in a way that recognizes that all these other people matter. That they're not just competitors who stand in the way of us taking care of ourselves and our family. They're also people who we rely on in order to survive. So therefore, while we still have to compete, we can compete in ways that minimize the harm on them. We can incorporate in the choices that we make the fact that this is how we survive every day, and that we appreciate what they do, that they really matter, that the earth really matters, that the trees really matter because I don't breathe without them. Okay. And therefore, we can exercise our freedom that honors the very things that support our existence. Right. I leave it up to you. I leave it up to myself. I trust you as I trust myself that we will know what to do once we now recognize that we don't survive independently. That exercising our freedom without consideration of all we need to survive is not freedom. That's suicide. So the good news about this breadcrumb, about recognizing that because we control what we do, we can make sure to minimize, if not eliminate, how we contribute to the problems that we see in the world. By doing what? By honoring how we actually survive every day. By incorporating the wisdom of our lived experience into the choices we make. By penetrating past the cultural belief system that encourages us to think we're separate from each other and that all we are the things that make us different. No, we are far more than the things that make us different. Most of who we are the same, right? And the imbalance in our society is we've put so much emphasis on what makes us unique, right? That we treat each other like we're aliens. We're not. We're humans. And we don't survive without each other. And we won't survive unless we get back to a culture and a society that remembers that. So that's your breadcrumb for episode 2. I have enjoyed this discussion, and I hope you have too. Go back, listen to it again, and then join me for episode 3. Thank you so much. I'm going to end the podcast here, but the episode here, but what I would like to remind you is you can join the Breadcrumbs community. If you find this valuable, join the Breadcrumbs community. Support me in bringing this message to as many people as possible by going to Patreon and join one of the memberships. If economics makes it difficult for you to contribute, you have an opportunity to get a partial scholarship, or you have an opportunity to get a full scholarship. Join for free. Write me, let me know that you cannot afford any of the tiers, and you will get a full membership. And then we really can have you participate in this conversation. Thank you so much. You take care. Be well. Episode 3 coming in 1 week. Bye for now.